Today, we are diving deep into the story of Mary Cosby. Now, you might know her as a reality TV star, but her real life is so much more complex and, frankly, so much more controversial than anything you've seen on screen. This is a story that involves a powerful church, a really mysterious death, a marriage that turned heads everywhere, and a tragedy that is just absolutely heartbreaking.
Everything, and I mean everything, really starts with this number, 19. Why 19? Well, that's how many days it took Mary Cosby to marry her own step-grandfather right after her first divorce was finalized. Yeah, less than 3 weeks. It's a fact that sounds completely unbelievable, and it's the very foundation of a story that is just filled with alleged manipulation, bitter family conflict, and a whole lot of money.
So you have to ask, right? How on earth does something like this happen? How does a woman who's only in her early 20s end up marrying the man who was her grandmother's husband? To get it, to really understand, we have to go all the way back to the beginning.
Right, so let's be clear. This wasn't some spontaneous whirlwind romance. Not at all. It was a rapid and, some would say, calculated series of events that were all tied to a massive inheritance and a supposed dying wish that would completely change the course of Mary's entire life.
Okay, just look at this timeline. It's wild. In 1997, Mary's grandmother Rosemary, who was the founder of their church, dies. Then, a little less than a year later, on September 8th, Mary's divorce is finalized. And then, get this, just 19 days after that, she marries Robert C. Cosby Sr., her late grandmother's husband. The speed of all this is, well, it's just staggering.
So, what was the official reason for this? Well, Mary's public story is that her grandmother basically arranged the marriage from beyond the grave. She said it was a condition of the will. If she wanted to inherit the family empire, the church, all its businesses, everything, she had to marry Robert Sr. It was all presented as this sacred duty to preserve the spiritual lineage and protect her grandma's legacy.
And here it is, in her own words. She frames it like it was this sacred obligation, a duty to her grandmother. She's always maintained that this union, no matter how strange it seems to the rest of us, brought them blessings. But behind this very tidy story of devotion, her own family was telling a very, very different tale.
So while Mary was out there presenting this narrative of, divine will, her own mother was painting a much, much darker picture, one filled with suspicion, forgery, and some pretty serious accusations of manipulation.
Mary's mother raised some major red flags. First, she said Rosemary was perfectly healthy before she died. Then Robert Sr. refused to allow an autopsy. When the body was eventually exhumed, they found Valium in her system. On top of all that, Robert Sr. was actually successfully sued for forging Rosemary's signature to get his hands on property. And maybe the most disturbing part, Mary's own mother claimed Robert isolated her daughter to brainwash her into the new marriage.
Now, at the absolute center of all this is the Faith Temple Pentecostal Church. And according to former members, once Mary and Robert Sr. took control, it transformed from a place of worship into, well, something far more sinister.
The contrast here just couldn't be more stark. On one side, you have Mary insisting her motives are pure, that it's all about faith. But then you hear from former members who allege she literally called herself God, that she pressured them to drain their 401ks for the church, and then used all that money to fund this incredibly extravagant lifestyle. I mean, listen to this quote from someone who was there. It's incredibly powerful. It alleges a pattern of mental abuse and paints a picture of an environment built not on faith, but on fear and submission. It is a complete and total contradiction to the benevolent, godly image Mary tries to project to the world.
So with this unbelievably complex and controversial backstory, Mary Cosby steps onto the national stage with the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. And as you can probably imagine, her personality made for some absolutely unforgettable and highly controversial television.
Her time on that show was just a lightning rod for criticism. I mean, from the shockingly insensitive hospital smell comment to a whole series of racially charged remarks, and of course, who could forget her infamous Freudian slip to her co-star Jen Shaw, who was facing federal fraud charges at the time. That one line, it became an instant classic.
But beyond all the church drama and the reality TV antics, there is the most tragic part of Mary's story. Because for all the controversy, she was also a mother, and the story of her only son, Robert Jr., is one of profound heartbreak.
On the show, Robert Jr. so bravely opened up about his long battle with addiction, which started when he was just a teenager. He talked about wanting to help others by sharing his own story. He went to rehab, but his struggles unfortunately continued, leading to several arrests. And then, so tragically, he passed away from a reported overdose. He was only 23 years old.
This moment, which was captured on the show, it's so difficult to watch now. Mary told her son that he was the only thing that had ever made her truly happy. It just reveals the incredible depth of their bond, and it makes the tragedy that followed almost unbearable to think about.
And this detail from his obituary really says it all. He wasn't just her son, he was her closest confidant. In a life that seems to be defined by isolation and really difficult relationships, this loss is it's simply immeasurable. And it kind of forces you to re-examine everything we've just talked about. So we're left with this question. After looking at the strange marriage, the suspicious death, the shocking church allegations, and the absolutely devastating loss of her son, who is Mary Cosby? Is she this manipulative cult leader who orchestrated her own rise to power? Or is she maybe the first victim in this whole story? A young woman who was groomed into a life she never really chose? Or is the truth, like it so often is, somewhere in the messy middle? That, of course, is for you to decide.